Hello and welcome to this VTC course on Premiere Pro CS5. My name is Mark Struthers and I've been authoring courses for VTC for a year or so now. In that time, I authored a course on Premiere Pro CS4, the version before the version we're looking at in this tutorial. And fairly recently, I authored a course on Premiere Pro CS5, this version of Premiere Pro, but as a quick start guide. In addition, I've run courses on Premiere Elements 8, the sister program to Premiere Pro. In addition to authoring courses for VTC, I run my own business, Energy Studios, and part of what I do is making films, commercial, corporate, music videos, etc., and have been making these types of films for more years than I can remember to tell the taxman about. You know I'm joking. Anyway, I'm not sure if you've worked your way through the quick start guide to Premiere Pro CS5 that I authored. If you have, then you'll notice during this full course, I'm going to expand on the tutorials presented in the quick start guide. What I'm going to do in this course is I'm going to construct a film about local country walks in the area in which I live that take in various local pubs. Throughout this course, I'm going to step through pretty much every essential element required to make a professional-looking film with Premiere Pro CS5. Now on the way, we'll take in, briefly I suppose, some other Adobe programs like After Effects and Sound Booth and Photoshop to help us out construct our film. This course should last around about 8 hours, and there are about 8 or 9 chapters to this course. Some of the things that we're going to look at and we're going to learn are creating projects, creating sequences, how we set preferences in Premiere Pro so that it works exactly how we like it. We're going to look at the different panels within the interface, the project panel, the timeline area, the source monitor, the audio mixer, etc. When we start getting more into the details, we're going to look at file formats that we can use within Premiere Pro. We're going to look at how we can edit audio precisely. We'll look at timecode and how this is absolutely crucial and relevant when we are making films and we need to dub audio and synchronize dialogue to the millisecond. We're going to get creative and I'll show you how to use filters. We'll look at how we use the edit tools, such as the razor tool, to make simple edits. We'll look at the importance of rendering and how, with Premiere Pro CS5 and how it needs to run on a 64-bit operating system, how the program ships with various different effects that run natively and don't actually require rendering. More on this as we progress. As I say, we'll look at effects, in particular the native video effects that come with Premiere Pro, and we'll also look at how we use third-party effects too. We're going to look at keyframing and how this allows us to adjust either audio or filters over time. We'll also look at how we adjust time, either slowing a movie clip down or speeding it up or even reversing it. And an essential component of making a film, the use of titles. Well, we're going to be looking at titles too, in particular the titling panel, how we use safe zones, rolls and crawls, drop shadows, shape objects, etc. And finally, we'll finish up by looking at how we export our film, either as individual files or how we collect a group of files together and make a DVD using Premiere Pro's sister program Encore that comes free with the program. At one time, you had to buy Encore, but now, since the previous version CS4, Encore comes bundled with Premiere Pro, free of charge. How fantastic is that? Let's progress and make our own movie. I love the fact Adobe has spent so much time and resources into making the whole creative suite, of which Premiere Pro CS5 is just one element. I love the creative suite because as powerful a program Premiere Pro is, it gets turbocharged when combined with companion programs such as After Effects, Photoshop, Sound Booth, Illustrator, Flash, etc. Now, during this course, of course, I'll be predominantly working with Premiere Pro CS5, but let me briefly explain how some of the other Creative Suite programs link in. Premiere Pro CS5 is very powerful, and you won't actually need to use other programs to create a perfect finished movie. However, if you do want to add some extra effects after you've worked in Premiere Pro, then the aptly named After Effects is for you. And the good news is VTC produced some great courses on After Effects CS5 for you to view. Let me just explain one reason why After Effects is great to add effects after. Handheld footage, as you know, is very shaky, especially if you've been on one of these Cheshire pub walks. Now, by using the Stabilize Motion option in After Effects, you can remove the handheld shaky footage and stabilize it enough to make it appear it was shot on a tripod. Have a look at this footage of a country pub about a mile or so from my house. As you can see, it's not static enough to be usable as a professional shot segment. Now, I know you can't hear it on this clip because I've removed it, but the original ambient sound was fairly quiet in volume and is somewhat punctuated by noise from handheld camera handling. So by using a combination of two Premiere Pro CS5 partner programs, After Effects and Soundbooth, or even Audition for audio, if you prefer to use Audition rather than Soundbooth, then you'll be able to rectify the two problems with ease. Now, as we progress through the course, I'll show you how it's done. And, once done, the newly cleaned up and polished clip can be re-imported into Premiere Pro CS5 to use within your filmmaking procedure. I mentioned Photoshop and Illustrator too. Now, understandably, you might wonder what two image-making programs have to do with film. Well, a couple of things really. Film sections, or film sequences as you'll get to know the term, well, they often benefit from photographic images or illustrations to help punctuate or focus one aspect of your film. Remember in the first tutorial where you saw an illustration of one of the pubs? Well, that illustration can be used as the background or establishing shot for a title or information sequence, for example. So, hopefully you can see how using the other programs within the Creative Suite can help make your films even more professional looking. Now, don't get too worried and don't panic. As I said at the beginning of this tutorial, you don't have to use these extra programs. Premiere Pro CS5 is a complete program, a standalone program in itself, and your filmmaking will be perfect. All I'm saying is these extra programs help to make your workflow easier. Okay, right, let's leave it here for now, and we'll progress. I realise a lot of you viewing this VTC course will be brand new to Premiere Pro and will understandably be asking the questions, what exactly is Premiere Pro CS5 and what can it do for me that requires or justifies the quite considerable price tag? Well, the price tag first. Yes, it seems expensive, but only until you appreciate what it can do for you. Incidentally, if you need a cut-down version of Premiere, cut down in terms of cost and features, then have a look at Premiere Elements, and it's on version 8 at the moment. Not only does it allow you to make very capable films, but it contains an integrated DVD menu maker and burning software engine. Now you'll remember when I said Premiere Pro comes with a separate DVD authoring program called Encore for those duties. So if you use Premiere Elements, all that side, the DVD authoring, is all integrated within the same program, unlike Premiere Pro, where you have a sister program, a separate program, called Encore. So, what is Premiere Pro? Well, Adobe describe it as a program that makes every step of video production more efficient. And they go on to say that Premiere Pro CS5, alongside another Adobe product, Adobe Story, and Adobe's On Location and Adobe's Encore, well, they provide tools for every step, from script writing to on-location capture through post-production to final delivery. And that's as good a description as any, I suppose. I expect it's probably better to show you what it can do for you, so that's the purpose of this course. To be precise, Premiere Pro CS5 is a digital, non-linear editing software program. Now, that description actually helps to explain Premiere Pro's price tag, because what can be done with Premiere Pro today within the digital domain would have taken considerable time with old analog equipment, and time always translates into cost. Premiere Pro CS5's digital dimension therefore saves you tons of time, and therefore you can either cut your prices and get more work, or retain your high prices and work less for the same income. Let me expand on what I mean by non-linear. The non-linear aspect of the previous description means that once you have all your assets, video clips, sound, photographs, illustrations, etc., then you don't have to wind analog tape back and forth in a linear fashion searching for these assets. So non-linear means all your assets, in whole or part, can be accessed instantly and so save you time. With old analog tape video editing suites, then if you had a certain asset, you would have to search through the tape to find it, shuttling the tape heads backwards and forwards. Now with digital and the non-linear approach, then you might have some photographs, you might have some illustrations, you might have audio, you might have video clips, and they can be spread in all sorts of different folders all over your hard drive, but that makes no difference to Premiere Pro because, depending on the power of your computer of course, Premiere Pro can access any of these files pretty much all at the same time. And even better, an 8-minute video clip, you might only want 10 seconds of it, well you can very quickly, very easily just find that 8 seconds that you need, rather than having to play the whole thing through trying to find it. Great stuff. You get to finish your films early and quicker. You can't complain at that. I think if you've got this far and have bought a copy of Premiere Pro CS5, it would be safe to assume you are comfortable with installation of the program. However, just in case you are running a downloaded trial from Adobe's website, let me just run a couple of essential system requirements by you. One important consideration, certainly if you buy your copy of Premiere Pro CS5 on disc rather than download, and I do encourage you to get the disc in case of hardware crashes. This way you've always got a copy. I know you could download it again if you've got the download version, but it is a big download size to have to grab again. Anyway, once you have the installation disc, do be aware you will require a dual layer DVD drive rather than a single layer DVD drive. Apparently some users got caught out and confused by this. So, once you've installed your program, you'll need to enter the serial number provided, and then, from there, you'll need an internet connection to activate your software. Without activating online, you'll only be able to use the program in trial mode for 30 days. After that, you'll get locked out until you purchase the program and get your serial number. If you lose the serial number, by the way, you can always access it through Adobe's site, provided you have set up an Adobe ID. In terms of system requirements, you can get a full list from Adobe's website, but let me just point out a couple of requirements so you are prepared. The first and most essential system requirement you'll need to appreciate is CS5 is the first iteration of Premiere Pro that requires, or should I say demands, a 64-bit operating system. In this respect, i.e. a 64-bit operating system, so does After Effects, Premiere Pro's companion program I've mentioned previously. Additionally, you'll need on the Windows platform to use Vista or Windows 7. For Mac, you'll need OS X 10.5.7 or 10.6.3, which is necessary for GPU accelerated performance. In terms of RAM required, you'll just about get by with 2 GB, but the more the better for good performance. I've got 8 GB in my machine and it runs smoothly with that. If you're going to be mainly editing compressed video formats, then a 7200 RPM hard drive will be enough for you. But if you will be editing uncompressed formats, and hence larger files, then you'll need your system set up as RAID. Now these terms RAID and compressed and uncompressed, further information about this can be found in the Adobe Help applet that comes with the program. More on this in the next tutorial. Moving on. For seamless graphics, you'll need to purchase a graphics card that Adobe recommend, such as NVIDIA graphics cards. And for optimum sound, you'll need an ASIO sound card, and if you use Apple's QuickTime format, you'll need QuickTime 7.6.2 software or later. Finally, for internet features, and there are a few internet features with the program, we'll cover those as we get to them, well, you'll require a fast broadband connection. Well, I think that's about it all covered for this system requirements and installation tutorial. Okay, I think I'll go on a country walk. I know it's pretty unlikely you'll need any further assistance with Premiere Pro CS5 than you get here with this VTC course, But you'll be surprised to learn there are some people who haven't discovered the delights of VTC and struggle on trying to learn the program on their own. More fool them. To help them out, Adobe do provide a way of learning Premiere Pro, in fact all of the Creative Suite, and that's through their help interface accessed by the desktop icon. In the past, the help provided with Adobe products has been restricted to simple HTML or PDF guides, but now it's all gone high-tech with this user interface. Well, progress comes at a price. Users are split on this user interface. Some say great, some say hate. To be honest, initially I was on Team Hate, but now I'm on Team Great. The reason I was on Team Hate initially was because I was a little confused how it works. So I'll show you how it works so you can join Team Great. As I say, when you installed Adobe programs such as Premiere Pro CS5, automatically the help guide gets installed too. The interface is shared by as many or as few Adobe programs you have installed. In fact, just one glance at the icons indicates the programs you have installed, and therefore access is provided to either online help or offline help. The online and offline help are exactly the same, provided you keep it up to date with the latest downloads. More on this in a moment. So, at present, you can see I have all these Adobe programs installed, and if I want to access Premiere Pro CS5 help information, I'd just click on the PR icon. Now, if you're not totally familiar with the icons yet, just roll over the symbol to reveal a tooltip informing you of the related program. So I'll just click the PR icon to open up the help information. As you can see, we have a list of chapters. I'll just scroll down to see them all, and back up again. Across the top, in Premiere Pro purple, we get the name of the program, Adobe Premiere Pro CS5, just to ensure we are looking at the right program, rather than searching through help for another program like Dreamweaver or something like that. Now to the right, we can click this link to access a PDF version of this reference guide. Now, I think you'd be as well to grab this and save it to your desktop. Right, to return to the overview page, just click the Home/House icon here. On the far left, we get this extra area that allows us to search, more on this later, or set our preferences by going to Edit and down to Preferences. Now we get this Preferences dialog box where we can organize how we want the Adobe Help system to operate. As you can see, it's split into two areas, a left and a right. Now, if you want to change the way it looks, click either the dark or light radio button. I'll leave it on light. The middle section of the right-hand area allows you to choose how you want the help displayed. You can choose between this Adobe Community Help application or the second option to just open in a browser. The bottom section offers a no, yes option to display, within this application, a direct online link to the most up-to-date help information, or to use what you have got saved on your PC already. Okay, I'll just move to the left area now and check online to see if there are any help file updates I need to get. To do this, click on Update Settings, and two options are made available. If I want Adobe to monitor my PC and inform me when updates are available, I'd check the top radio button to notify me when updates are available. I'll choose to manually check now. Make sure you're connected to the internet before you do this and click Manage Now. Okay, I get a comprehensive list of all the help guides available related to the programs I have installed. In this third field, the status field, I can see that most of the help guides are up to date, indicated by the message current. But here's one that's out of date. So I just click on it, then click Update down here, and a progress bar informs me it's being updated. Okay, once updated, this message pops up to let me know the compressed downloaded files are being extracted and made available to use. And now the status is indicated as current. Right, I'll scroll down to see what else needs updating. There are 4 here, so I'll click Update for them all. The first one is updating, and the subsequent updates are now marked as being in the queue, ready to update once the first update is complete. I'll scroll down again to search for others. Okay, here's another. I'll click Update, and it gets queued, because something's already been downloaded, as we saw a second ago. Down again to see if there are any further updates available. All the time I'm online, Adobe inspects my PC to check what requires an update. Okay, back to the top to see how the downloads are going. Right, once all done and back on the home page, I can click the relevant program, in this case Premiere Pro CS5, to open the help guide. Now, by clicking any of these chapter links reveals pertinent information related to what we click, in this case, what's new. Scroll down and up to read all about what's new in Premiere Pro CS5. Clicking the right arrow button here moves you forward to the next available chapter, and again until you find the chapter required. I'll click Home now. Speaking of navigating through chapters, if we want to search for a topic very quickly, use this straightforward search field to enter a search term, and use the drop-down to pick the relevant program. This is likely to always be Premiere Pro, in our case because that's the program we are using, but could occasionally be another linked program such as After Effects or Sound Booth. We'll go back to Premiere Pro now and search for all references in this help guide for the term tapeless. Before we search, we could click this reveal arrow to filter our search parameters to either just Premiere Pro or the whole Creative Suite. Now this provides the option to search all CS5 documents at once rather than just choosing one program up here. And now when I click enter on my keyboard, I get all these references from within the Premiere Pro guide that contain the word tapeless. Okay, so that's how the Adobe Help Community System Guide helps us and guides us to find any information that we might require. Okay, good one. Let's leave it here for this tutorial. At the very start of creating a film with Premiere Pro, we require, at the very least, footage. Now, we might add other assets too, such as illustrations and photographs and audio. And whatever we add, what I suggest is that we collect them all together and place into a project folder. Now, this isn't strictly essential because Premiere Pro is an NLE, a non-linear editor program, that can grab assets from all over your hard drive. But I think it just helps to focus our creative talents if we have our assets in one project folder. So, before I start a project and open Premiere Pro, I create a folder on my hard drive and call it something relevant to the film being made. In this case, I'll call it Cheshire Pub Walks. And again, for good housekeeping, inside this folder, I create folders for audio, photographs, illustrations, and raw footage. And as the project expands, by necessity, I will add other folders as necessary. I know I have some footage of one local pub on a country walk on my hard drive, so what I could do is I could cut it and paste it into the raw footage folder. Now, I could copy it and paste it into this folder, but there's no need to duplicate it and cluttering up my hard drive. Having said that, what I often do, for safety, is to ensure I burn these raw files to a blank DVD so that I always retain a pristine copy of the files before I start working in Premiere Pro. Alternatively, I could copy them to a separate backup drive, again for safety reasons. Right, I'll move some other files into folders now, such as audio files and photographs. I know it might seem odd saying I'm using photographs in a film, but as mentioned earlier, they do come in useful for title sequences or static shots. And in terms of the content of this Cheshire Pub Walks film, then photographs and illustrations can provide quite a substantial part of the film. And once all the assets I have at the inception of this project are in place, it's only at this point do I open up Premiere Pro to create a project. And creating a Premiere Pro project will be the focus of the next tutorial. In the last tutorial, we saw how I organise, well generally anyway, how I organise my hard drive so that I collect together all the different assets that I know that I'm going to use at the inception of a project. And I collect them all together and make sure that they are all within a folder that I can easily find once I get to this stage when I open up Premiere Pro and see this Welcome to Adobe Premiere Pro splash screen, this user interface here. In this tutorial, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a project, and I'll go through the various interface options that we can see here. Once we've got this splash screen up, this user interface, we'll notice that it's very similar to the splash screen for all the CS5 programs within the Creative Suite. So this uniformity between programs allows the fluid migration of skills between all the CS programs. Let's have a quick look around to see what there is available for us. We'll notice here where it says recent projects, any projects that were recently opened or created with Premiere Pro. We'll come back to this in a moment. If we want to create a brand new project, then clearly we would choose this first icon here of these three, this first one on the left where it says new project. We'll come to this in a moment. I've just alluded to the fact that we have some recent projects, but we've only actually got one in the list at the present time. It might well be that you've got a list here of 5, 10, however many recent projects that you've got open. And you'd wonder why this middle icon, this open project icon, is available when we can see our recent projects here. Well, obviously, for a couple of reasons, I suppose. You might have some projects on your hard drive that haven't been opened recently. It might be a project you worked on last year and you want to come back to it. Well, clearly, then you would use this icon, the Open Project icon, to navigate to that particular project on your hard drive. Additionally, this Open Project icon also comes in useful when you are working on a project that was started by somebody else on a different computer. So, a colleague of yours, I suppose, working on a Premiere Pro CS5 project might have given you all the particular files that make up or constitute that particular project. He or she might give you those files on a CD or a DVD or even an external hard drive. Well, by using this middle icon here, then you would be able to open the particular project. Now, going back to what we saw at the end of the first chapter of this VTC course, when we looked at the Adobe Help, then if we want to access that quickly, then we would just click on the Help icon here. Okay, so that's a very quick overview of the splash screen, this user interface here, and the three options across the bottom here, these icons plus this fourth option here, and how they are made available to us so that we can either start a new project or open an existing project, whether it's one that's been given to us by somebody else or whether it's one we've not opened for a while, or by going up here to the recent projects, then just clicking on the link will open that project for us, or finally the third icon there is the Help icon. Okay. Right, let's leave it here for now, and we'll move on. Let's move forward now from this quick start screen and create a new project. So, as you can guess, all I need to do is go down to the new project icon here and click it now. And as soon as I do, we are presented with this new project user interface. And you can see across the top here we have two tabs. We have a General tab and we have a Scratch Discs tab. We'll come back to Scratch Discs in a moment. We'll just go back to the General tab for the moment. And with this user interface, we get to set up 5 different settings that are relevant and pertinent to just this particular project. The first area I want to look at is this one here where it says Action and Title Safe Areas. And at the moment you can see the title safe area is set at 20% horizontal and 20% vertical, and the action safe area is set as 10% horizontal and 10% vertical. Now what this means is, owing to different TV sets around the world, overscanning occurs. Now, what overscanning means is that the outer edges of the viewing area of the film you're making, because of the overscanning, well, that is expanded, this outer edge of the viewing area, it is expanded outside of the exact area that you set. So here in the UK, I'm using PAL, which is set at 720 by 576 pixels. So you would automatically assume that all those pixels would be rendered on your TV screen. Well, overscanning will just crop the outer edges of your movie, the result being that it would be safe if we kept the focal point, the main focal area of a film, within what's known as a safe area. And if we see here where we looked at before, the action safe area, Premiere Pro designates 10% horizontal and 10% vertical with a grid which is laid over the top of your footage. By the way, this is invisible on the actual created film. It's just a grid that's laid over the top so that we can see what would be known as an action safe area. We'll see more on this as we actually start to create the project and we bring in assets in a later tutorial. The title safe area is set at 20%, both horizontal and vertical by default, but you can change this should you want to just by highlighting it and just typing in something else there. I'm going to leave it at the default at 20% for the title safe area and 10% for the action safe area. So just to reiterate then, to be safe, Premiere Pro places a grid over the movie, but only within Premiere Pro. It's not on the final film. And this grid is placed over the movie so you can ensure all the main focal elements of the film will be seen, both in terms of the drawing area and the title area. Okay, let's move down to the video options now, and we've got a display format set here by default as timecode. I'm going to leave it on timecode, but by using the reveal there, we can choose one of these four available options. I'm going to leave it at timecode. I prefer to work that way. Okay, now with the audio display format, again I'm going to leave it at audio samples because I think that's a much more accurate method when we zoom in to the audio later on. But we can choose milliseconds should we want to. I'm going to take it back to audio samples. One of the methods of bringing in digital video footage is by capturing it from a digital video tape, and I'll be doing this later on in addition to bringing in video footage that was recorded to an SD card. But when I do want to capture from a digital videotape, then my capture format will be DV there, digital video, or you could do HDV there. Okay, I'm going to go back to DV. Something we'll see an awful lot later on is the term rendering. And what rendering does, it allows you to play back your film smoothly, because when you render a certain section of the film, you are asking Premiere Pro to create a new section of perhaps a blended area between two clips. Again, more on this later on. Now, my system has what's called the Mercury Playback Engine GPU acceleration there, but you can just do the software only if you want to. I'm going to leave it at that. Now, this is a choice that you're going to have to make specific for your particular system. Right, I'm going to leave the bottom two sections for the time being, and I'm just going to go up to where it says Scratch Discs, the tab there, and I'll just click on there. I'm going to leave all my settings as the default. Captured video as same as project. Captured audio same as project, video previews and audio previews same as project. However, it's better if you do designate a new drive for the scratch discs. Let me just explain. Premiere Pro as an NLE searches all over our hard drive, and that's why I set a specific folder, so Premiere Pro doesn't have to be jumping all over the hard drive looking for all the different assets and consequently slowing down the performance. Now, when you edit a movie, Premiere Pro has to create preview files for some of the assets, and a scratch disk is set as default to the project folder, as we've just seen. But a scratch disk designated by the user means better performance if the user designates a scratch disk to be set to a different drive to the operating system and the drive where the raw assets are located. Okay, now as I said, I'm going to leave the scratch disk settings as the same as the project for this tutorial. But So as I say, it's better to create a different folder for all the different audio and video previews, audio previews as necessary. Okay, I'm going to go back to the General tab now, and we'll go down to the bottom where it says Location and Name. Now, what this is asking me is the location. Where do I want to save the project that I am making? Now, I don't want it on this C drive where my operating system is and where the program is installed. I'm going to save it to my D drive, so I'll just browse and go to my D drive and just find the relevant folder, the Premiere Pro CS5 projects there, and I've got Cheshire Pub Walks as my overall folder. And remember how earlier we created all these different folders. Just at the time being, make sure you are in the main folder there, the Cheshire Pub Walks. Okay, if you haven't got one set up already, just click Make New Folder there. I'll just click OK. So now when I save this project, it's going to be saved in that path there, into that folder. And just so that I know when I use the quick start screen which previous projects I've used, I'm going to put a name in here, and I'll call this Cheshire Pub Walks. And now all set, all I need to do is click OK. And as soon as we do, we are presented with this new sequence user interface. Admit it, you thought we were all done. Well, with this new sequence user interface, we can set the type of sequence that we want to use. We'll come back to this in the next tutorial. For now, I'm just going to click on standard there and leave it set as sequence 01. Okay? Right, in the next tutorial, as I say, we'll look at this user interface in more detail. Okay, see you in a second. In the last tutorial, we got as far as this interface, the new sequence interface. When we get this far, we are asked initially to choose a preset from this huge selection here that we want our end movie to play back in this particular format. Now, because I'm in the UK, I'll choose PAL, DV PAL here. Notice, even with this option, I'm given a choice between standard and widescreen. So I'll just click on standard. Notice that whichever preset you choose, a summary of the settings used that constitute the preset is made available in these two sections, the preset description at the top there and in the general description just below. Now, with this standard 48 kHz DV PAL setting that I've just gone for, then we can see that my editing mode is DV PAL as we would expect. The time base is 25 frames per second as we would expect with the PAL standard, and the video settings here, the frame size is 720 by 576, etc, etc. Everything seems to be in order. Now, just this bottom section of this general area where it says default sequence, then we'll notice it tells us that we have a total video tracks of 3 and a master track type stereo, mono track 0, etc, etc. Now we're going to look at how we set this in a second, and this can be adapted to suit your purposes. Now, you will have noticed that there are these 3 tabs available across the top here. The sequence presets, we've got general, and we've got tracks. Back to sequence presets there. We've seen this first tab, the sequence presets, so let's look at what else is available. We'll just nip across to the middle tab there, the general tab. Now, when you create a movie in Premiere Pro, it's likely you'll know what length the film will roughly end up as. For example, a pop video you might be making would be around 4 minutes. You would know how long it is, judging by the length of the actual audio track itself. And I suppose if you are making a film, you're not going to be accurate to the minute or to the second, but you know roughly how long the film will last. It might last 90 minutes, it might only last 10 minutes, it might last 120 minutes. Who knows, but you'll have a rough idea. Now, the reason I'm bringing all this up is because if I'm making a long film, I would suggest breaking it up into lots of sections, or, as Adobe Premiere Pro names sections, into sequences. And that's why we have this sequence name section at the bottom where we can change the default from sequence 01 to whatever we want to make it. Okay, we'll do this in a moment. Now, what I would suggest doing if you are making a long film, whether it's 90 minutes, 100 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever, then having many short sequences allows you to focus on that part of the film, and it also offers the added benefit of not taxing your PC's CPU as much as it would if it was having to play back a full-length 90-minute film with all the assets, photographs, video, illustrations, audio, with all those assets having to play back in one sequence. As we progress through this course, we'll look at how we separate into different sequences for efficiency. The final tab across the top here of these three is Tracks, and we can see that when we set up our project initially, that on the timeline, and we'll get to the timeline in a later tutorial, on that timeline automatically we will have 3 tracks there. We can change this if we want to by clicking on it, typing in 2 if necessary, or even just by rolling your mouse over it, left click and just drag to the right or to the left to suit whatever you want it to be. I'll take it back to 3 there. There we go. And the audio component of the sequence, we will have a master stereo track, but we could change this to mono or 5.1 if we were working with surround sound, or 16 channel there. I'll leave it as the default stereo, and when we create our new sequence, we're not going to have any mono tracks because it's set to 0, and we're not going to have any 5.1 surround there. We're just going to have 3 stereo audio tracks made available to link in with the video tracks at the top. Okay, I'll go back to sequence presets there, and I'll just give my sequence name here something more meaningful, and I'll call it Introduction. And I'll just click OK. And once I do this, my new project will be created with a new sequence. I'll click OK now. And as you can see, as the project opens up, we've got our introduction sequence name here. OK, so that's how we set up a sequence with Premiere Pro. Let's move forward yet again. Okay, we've got Premiere Pro open now. We've got a project working for us, the one we set up in the last couple of tutorials, this Cheshire Pub Walks, with our introduction sequence in place. I'm not going to look at the user interface in this tutorial. We'll save that for a later tutorial. In this tutorial, we're going to look at preferences. If you're anything like me, you like the way Adobe products universally look and feel the same across the Creative Suite. However, I suppose there are some elements that you might like to adapt from the universal look and feel. And good news, you can whilst the program is running in terms of what are called workspaces. We'll come back to workspaces in a later tutorial. Changing a workspace adapts the look for individual projects. In this tutorial, we're going to set how the program looks and operates universally for all projects. So, as I say, the focus of this tutorial is setting preferences. Owing to how VTC courses are run, on the whole, we tend to have to cram up all these different panels into a smaller space. I'll try and avoid doing that as much as possible, but obviously for some of the tutorials the actual screen real estate here will look very cramped. In this case it's not, it's set at full resolution. Anyway, if we want to change preferences, all we would have to do is go up here to where it says Edit and drop down to the bottom there where it says Preferences, and then we get this extra fly out to the right hand side and we get all these different options here. We could just choose one of these if we want to, if we wanted to choose audio there for example, and then you can see here that the audio tab of all these different settings is highlighted. However, let me just close that down and go back to the Edit Preferences there and fly out to General. We're going to start at the top there, General. Okay, and as you can see, the General tab of all these 15 different tabs is highlighted in a sort of lighter grey there. Right, just to help you focus on this Preferences user interface, I'm going to fade away Premiere Pro from behind this. Okay, so as I've just said, we get all these 15 different tabs down here in the left hand side that we can choose: General, Appearance, Audio, Audio, Hardware, etc. I'll go back to General there. And on the right hand side over here, we get revealed preference settings that we might want to alter related to the actual tab we've got checked here. So if it's General, we get this. If we've got Appearance, we get this. If we've got Memory, we get this, etc. Let's go back to General. Now, as I say, I'm not going to go through every single preference setting here. We'll do that more as we progress through the course, as and when necessary. So even though we've not yet had a look around the interface, it's worth glancing at some of the available options here. I won't change any of these options yet. We'll do this as we progress through the course where necessary. Okay, so with this general tab, a couple of the things we might want to look at. Here, for example, video transition default duration and audio transition default duration. Here we can find settings you can alter in relation to how long you want a transition from one clip to another, i.e. the fade between two clips that we might have. We might have one clip that lasts, say, 10 seconds, another clip just after it might last another 8 seconds. And rather than have an abrupt change between those two clips, we might want to fade in between. Well, we can set the duration of the fade here, the video transition, to, well, it's set at the default at 25 frames. Now, in the UK, I'm using the PAL format, and that translates to 25 frames per second. So with this being set at 25 frames, this means the default duration will be 1 second in length between the two clips. This will make much more sense to you as we see this in action later on. We can see the audio transition default duration is set to 1 second there. And if we want to import a still image, a photograph or an illustration, then if we do that, by default, it will be set at 125 frames. What's that? That's 5 seconds, isn't it? At 25 frames per second. Now remember, these are default durations. We can alter any of this at any time. We might drag a video transition onto our timeline between two clips, and automatically it will be set at 25 frames or 1 second, but we can alter this at any time within the program. Or we might want to change it now. Just double click there and I'll change it to 50. Okay, so now the default video transition will be 50 frames or 2 seconds. I'll change that back to 25. There we go, 25. Just moving down slightly, where it says timeline playback auto scrolling, we get a choice of 3 options here with this reveal. I'll just drop it down. We get no scroll, page scroll, which is what we're on at the moment. We can see it highlighted there, or smooth scroll. So as your movie is playing back on the timeline, if the full length of the movie, maybe it's 5 minutes long, maybe it's 10 minutes long, maybe it's only 1 minute long, but on the timeline you might only be focused in on, say, 10-15 seconds. So every 10 or 15 seconds that go by, the page will scroll over for me. Whereas if I choose this bottom option, smooth scroll there, then the timeline will smoothly alter as the current time indicator, the CTI, moves along. As I say, more on this as we see it in action. It'll make much more sense. I prefer to go for page scroll because it uses less resources than smooth scroll. There's not a lot of difference in it, but I just prefer to keep it at page scroll, so I'll just go back onto there now. When we set our project, what is immediately made available as an option to us for video clips or audio clips, we can see here, and we can change this. So on an audio track, for example, we can see keyframes, and again, more on keyframes as we progress. And on the video track timeline there, we can show keyframes too. We can alter this to whatever we want it to be of these 3, and we can alter this to any of these 5 options here. Again, I'm not trying to show you too much here. I'm just showing you the available options that you can alter as and when necessary as your project develops. Perhaps this checkbox here is worth looking at. Play work area after rendering previews. When we do render a project or part of a project, then it's often useful for us to actually see the project, that part of the work area that we've just rendered, that part of the work area, we'd like to see it play back at that point automatically. If we do, we would just check in there. It's not such a big job to just click the play button within Premiere Pro if we want to see it. But if you want to have it done automatically, just automatically play back, then you would check in there. Okay? Right, we'll leave this tutorial here, having now discussed the General tab, and in the next tutorial we'll look at a couple more of these different settings that we can alter down here. Okay, see you in a moment. Okay, let's pick up from where we left off in the last tutorial, looking at this Preferences user interface. We've glanced through some of the options here that we can change in the General tab. Let's look at a couple of the other options. We won't look at every one. First of all, let's just drop down to the next one down, the Appearance tab there. And as you can see, there's not an awful lot we can change here other than the brightness of the screen by just dragging this either to the left and making things darker or lighter there. Okay, I'll just click Default, which takes it back to the central location there. And as I say, there's not much else you can do there, but at least it's an option if you want to use that. We'll just drop down to the next one, Audio. Now, one of the options here that I want to look at is this one here where it says Play Audio While Scrubbing. And this is checked at the moment. And what this allows is when we are looking at the timeline, if we're looking at a particular movie and we drag the CTI, the current time indicator, and we drag it to the left, i.e. back in time, or to the right, and that takes us forward in time, if we do drag the CTI, then we will hear the audio component being played as well as seeing the visual, the video, moving too. This can be useful if you're trying to line up audio between 2 or 3 different camera views or different camera takes. And you might want to line up, as I say, the audio so that it works and matches to the beat, perhaps. Often I find this quite annoying though, with it checked. I do find it annoying sometimes if I'm just scrubbing along the timeline either forwards or backwards and I can hear the audio being played at the same time. It does annoy me, so I'm going to take that off, knowing full well that at any point I can just tick that again should I want to, if I need to hear the audio while scrubbing. Okay, let's move down to the audio hardware now. Now this is where you set your sound card that you have in your computer. Now at the moment I've got 2 options here with this drop down, the default device there. I can either have, with the drop down here, I can either have the Premiere Pro WDM sound device or my sound card, a Focusrite Sapphire Pro 24 I think it's called. Can't remember now off the top of my head. Never been very good at remembering things like that. I just look at it and operate it. Anyway, I can change it to the ASIO Sapphire device there, and that's probably the best choice in terms of sound. I've not got it set on the Sapphire for these tutorials, because if I need to play back the audio so that you can hear it, then the way my system is configured, I need to have it set at Premiere Pro WDM sound, so it will record any sound from the timeline as well as this narration. So that's why that's like that. But ordinarily it should be set to the better sound card. Okay? And if we want to change any of the ASIO settings, we would just click here, ASIO settings there, and we would just get this audio hardware settings, and we can choose, well, we've got output at the moment, or we can choose input there. Okay, I'll just take it back to output and click OK. I'll just nip down to autosave now, and what this does, I suppose it's self-explanatory, but as you are working on your files in your project, then it might well be that you do get carried away and forget to save the project periodically. Now this could cause problems if you have a crash for some reason, your PC crashes. Then if you've not got this set at automatically save projects, then you're not going to be able to go back to a recently saved project. So I'm going to leave this at automatically save projects, but I'm going to change the time here from automatically save every 20 minutes, and I'll just change that to 10 minutes. Okay, easy enough. And I'll just do that to save it. Very quickly, I'll just move down to label colors here. Within Premiere Pro, the way that your assets are imported, the different type of asset will take on a label, a different type of color here to indicate what type of file it is. So audio files, for example, would take on a particular color. All audio files will be that same color. All video files will be a particular color. All photographs will be a particular color. All sequences will take on a particular color. If you don't like the color that's chosen for you automatically, then you can just change it here. Now this is inextricably linked to the next one down, the next tab, label defaults there, in that, for example, audio we were talking about is green, and we'll just go back up to label colors there. The green there, well, you might not like that type of green, so just click on it once, and we get this color picker, and you might want a darker green there, for example, or even darker again. Okay, I'm going to cancel that. I'm going to leave it as it actually is as the default. But going back to label defaults there, you can see that you can change any of these colors, not only from the color picker there, from a deeper type of green for the audio in this case, or you can choose any one of these here by using the drop down there. Right, let me come down to memory now, and notice here that I've got installed 8 gigabytes of RAM. And out of that 8 gigabytes, what I'm told is, by default, The RAM reserved for other applications is 1.5 gigabytes. So that means 6.5 gigabytes is available for Premiere Pro. Okay, so as it says there, 6.5 gigabytes. But notice this sentence underneath here. It says this shared setting affects After Effects, Premiere Pro, Encore and Adobe Media Encoder. So that means this 6.5 gigabytes here will be shared between these very connected programs within the Creative Suite. And the other 1.5 gigabytes will be made available for other applications. Now you might say, well, why don't I just make that the total 8 gigabytes? Well, I suppose one reason for that is you might be using programs such as Sound Booth or Photoshop to do your photographic editing and audio editing. Then you don't want those two programs to be struggling to work. So we've left 1.5 gigabytes there for either of those two programs to use. Okay, so that's why that's set up like that. Okay, I'm going to leave this tutorial now on setting preferences. As I keep alluding to all the other tabs, we can change any of these as we go through the course at any particular time anyway. It's just that it's often worthwhile setting it up as an option like this at the beginning of your project. Okay, right, let's leave it here and we'll move on yet again. Okay, so now we've got our project set up and we have set our preferences, or at least some of them anyway. Let's explore the interface as it looks to us when we open up Premiere Pro CS5. As we can see, Premiere Pro is presented as a series of all these different panels. By clicking on each of these panels, notice that whenever I do click on a panel, we get an orange border all the way around that particular panel that we are looking at. Okay, I'll go back to the first one over here, the project panel. This top left panel, this project panel, this is the area where we keep all our assets. That will be the core components of our movie. For example, any audio, any photographs, illustrations, etc., any footage, any titles, anything that becomes involved with the making of the movie gets stored in this project panel here. Do you remember in the last tutorial where we looked at labels and I was talking about how each individual component, whether it's audio, whether it's a sequence, whether it's footage, they all take on a different coloured label. Let me just remind you, I'll go up to edit there, down to preferences and across to label defaults. And here we can see that the videos will take on a blue colour, audio take on a green colour, sequences take on a kind of grey colour there, and notice here that this is a sequence where it says introduction here. This is our sequence we set up earlier on in a previous tutorial. Well, the label colour is a grey there as it tells us it is here. I'll just cancel that. So this label section here helps us identify what type of asset we have in this project panel. More on this in a later tutorial. In the next panel moving along, this is called the source monitor. Well, it is as long as we've got this tab clicked here. Notice that there are 1, 2, 3, 4 different tabs across the top here. On the whole, when we are starting the film, we will use the source tab here so we can see our raw footage before we start doing anything with it. Over on the right here is what's called the program monitor or program panel. And this allows us to watch the progress of our movie as we start assembling it. Now, one way of working is here in the source monitor, we would ascertain our asset suitability and then add multiple clips down here in the sequence area. We would add our assets along this timeline, and as we build them up in the timeline, then they get reflected up here in the program monitor. So as our multiple assets are combined, then we can view our film here in the order that we decide. Now, notice down here, we've just touched on it, the main screen real estate is this area here, and it's taken up by this timeline panel. Incidentally, if we want to change any of these panels, all we have to do is just roll our mouse in between so it turns into a double-ended arrow there, just left click and just drag it to how we want it to look, okay, and move it back into so we can see it how we like it. And we can do the same by rolling over this line here and doing the same dragging up or down there, okay. At the bottom left here we get what's known as the browser panel, as you can see there where it says media browser, And we have some tabs here too. Media browser first, then information, then we've got effects. Let's just click on the border there, left click and drag to the right. We can see another tab there, history. All these tabs will become familiar to you as we progress through the course. Okay, I'll just adjust that back and put it back to where it was. And the last panel that we can see over here, far right at the bottom there, let me just drag this to the left so we can see it better, is our audio master meters here. So when we play back the video and any audio component that is playing back to, we can see registering here on this master meter. This incidentally also reflects up here on the audio mixer tab in the source monitor panel. Okay, let me just take this audio master meter section over there again to about there. That's how I like it. Okay, so that's a very quick, but I hope a comprehensive overview of all these different panels that we see dotted around the user interface here. Okay, let's move on. In the next tutorial, we'll focus on this project panel here. Okay, see you in a moment. In the last tutorial, we saw an overview of all the different panels that constitute the Premiere Pro CS5 user interface. Now, in this tutorial, we're going to look at one of the panels in particular. We're going to look at this panel here, the project panel. In the project panel, it's here that we assemble all our assets, whether they be photographs, illustrations, audio files, film footage, title sequences, sequences themselves, which is what we've got here. This introduction there, this is a sequence. More on sequences as we get to it, as we progress through the course. So, as I say, at present we only have our introduction sequence here. Now, although superficially this project panel doesn't look like much occurs, seeing as it's blank at the moment, well, a closer inspection will show there's more here than meets the eye initially. The first thing that you might notice is we have these two tabs across the top here. We have the project tab, and this is highlighted by this orange border all the way around. And to the right of the project tab, we have the resource central tab there. And as soon as we click on it, we get the orange border surrounding that there. I'm not going to look at resource central here. Let me just point out what resource central does. It links in to Adobe's website so you can get some more assets from there. At the present time, you can see that we are offline, indicated by offline here, and this red button. As soon as you connect to the internet and go to Resource Central, then you will get this lit up in green here saying that you are online. Okay, more on Resource Central as we get to it, as the course progresses. I'll just go back to the Project tab now. Right, as I say, all our assets live within this project panel. In the previous tutorial, we saw how we can just roll our mouse over the border there where it's orange and just left click and drag to the right. And by doing this, you'll notice that we get to see all these different fields across here that indicate something about the particular asset that we have at this present time. Now, as I say, we've only got this introduction asset at this moment, but a quick glance at these fields tell us, with the label field here, it's grey, so that tells us it is a sequence. The frame rate that this sequence will play back at is 25 frames per second, i.e. the PAL standard for the UK. Media start, media end and media duration aren't filled in because those aren't applicable fields to this introduction sequence. Just going back to the frame rate here of 25 frames per second, this links into this video information over here, the dimension 720 by 576 there, indicating that yes, we are using the PAL format. Now, if you don't want to stretch your project panel right to the right-hand side like this, just bring it back, left-click on the border there, and just bring it back to where you want it. And if you need to see these extra fields without stretching the panel to the right, just drag this slider down here, left-click, and just drag to the right there, and that reveals everything. And you can bring it back as necessary. And as you can see, we've got much more information that we could see by doing this, just dragging to the right. We only got as far as the video information before, didn't we? We saw this. Remember when we dragged the panel over towards the right? Now we can see some extra information that this introduction sequence is set up at 48,000 Hertz there in stereo, or 48 kilohertz. The audio format will play back at 48,000 Hertz there in stereo. And we have a tape name, description, log note, capture settings, status, scene, and a rating box there, whether we are going to use it or not, good or bad, I suppose that would indicate. Let me take this back to the beginning there. We also have this box here, and this is a search function, a search field. Now, if we have a number of assets compiled within our project panel here, and we were looking for one of the files in particular, and maybe we had 50 different files here, different types of files, some were sequences, some were photographs, some were audio files, some were raw footage, and we need to find one quickly, but we only knew the name of the file, then we could just type it in here and do a search. Okay, and linked to that is this field over here. I'll just drag this to the right so we see it more. And we would be searching in, at the present time it's set at the default as all, or we could change that to all those files that are visible, or we could search a text transcript. Okay, I'll just bring this back to where it was, around about there, isn't it? And across the bottom here, we have all these different icons, all these different feature buttons, and as we roll over them, notice we get told what they are. This is the list view, we go over to the icon view there, and moving along, automate to sequence, and then we would find another search linked in with up here, I suppose. The bins here, if we wanted to create a new bin or a new folder, we would go here for a new item if we wanted to create a new sequence, a new title, etc. Okay, so good. That's an overview of this project panel. In the next tutorial, I'm going to look at bringing in assets, such as video files, photographs, etc. And in a later tutorial, in a couple of tutorials time, I'm going to look more at this down here, this icon, when we are creating folders or a new bin, as Adobe calls it. And the purpose of creating a new bin or a new folder is so that we can assemble all our assets and place the individual types, i.e. all the audio files, into one audio folder, audio bin, all the photographs into a photographic bin, all the raw footage into a raw footage folder, so that this area here in the project panel doesn't become too cluttered. Okay, right, good. We'll leave it here for now, and I'll see you in the next tutorial. The bedrock of any film we make, of course, is comprised of all those elements that we collect together, such as, perhaps most importantly, raw footage. The film I'm making about Cheshire Pub Walks will include other asset types too, such as extra audio in the form of narration, ambient nature backing tracks. Music too will play its part, and perhaps some sound effects. Additionally, I'll use photographs and illustrations. Well, no matter what type of asset you use in a film, you'll need a method of bringing in these assets so that you can collect them all together here in the project panel. Now, it wouldn't be unusual at the inception of making your film not to have all the required assets in place, although if you do, it does make things a lot easier. However, because this is a walking guide that I'm making to Cheshire pubs, I haven't researched all the walks yet. But don't panic, I hasten to add I've researched most of the pubs. Anyway, whether you have all your assets in place or you only have some at present, you will need a way of bringing in your assets. Well, Premiere Pro CS5 offers a few different ways that achieve exactly the same outcome, bringing in assets. Okay, here goes. If you know you've used some files recently, then the quickest way of doing it is going up to File, up here, drop down to Import Recent File. So if you've been looking at some files, some movie files, for example, as I have here, these movie files I bought from iStock were for a previous project that I was making, but if I wanted to use these again in this particular project on Cheshire Pub Walks, then I could just click on any of these, and then that would import into my project that particular file. Bear in mind, it will only import it as a reference. It won't actually physically move the file from the location it is at the moment on my D drive in a folder called Stock, in a folder inside that called Movies, with these particular movie files, this Beekeeper file and these Pianist files. Okay, so it only brings in a reference to where it is on your hard drive. Another way, you probably spotted, of bringing in files is by going to the same place up here, File, and dropping down to Import. And clicking Import there brings up your project file for Adobe Premiere Pro. As you can see, I've got it on my D drive in Premiere Pro CS5 Projects and in a folder called Cheshire Pub Walks. And you'll remember from an earlier tutorial how I created some folders, one called Audio, one for illustrations, one for photographs, and one is for RAW. And the RAW files there, if I just double click it to open it, these are all the different movie files on one particular pub about a mile or so away from my house. Okay, I'm not going to bring these movie files in this way. I want to show you another method, so I'll just click cancel. And the third method is make sure you've got your mouse within this project panel and just right click. Move down to Import, and that takes you to the same Premiere Pro project file, which is this Cheshire Pub Walks folder. Okay, so I will bring one in now, so I'll just double click the RAW folder there, and I'll just bring this one here, this first one. Just click on it once, and then just click Open. And as soon as I do that, then we get the movie file presented here, and we get a little thumbnail version of the movie up here as well. To bring in some more files, do the same thing, right click, go to Import, and if I want to bring in multiple files at once, easily done, just click on the first one there, use the Shift key on my keyboard and go to the last file and click on that, and you'll notice now that all these files have now been highlighted with a blue background, and down here where it says file name, all these different movie files will now be brought into my project. So I'll just click Open, and as you can see, the Import Files dialog there is importing all the different files, and there we go, they're all down here for me. Just clicking on one again at random, shall we choose that one? Then, as you can see, another thumbnail up there, another thumbnail for that one, another thumbnail for that one, and we could just click on this play button here if we wanted to watch it back. Or we could just drag, just click on the left mouse button, just click on the drag slider there and just move it across like that or back. Okay? If we wanted to play it, just click on the play button there, and as you can see, you perhaps can't see with this particular thumbnail, but as you can see, it is actually moving. Okay, I'll just stop that now. Right, that's how we bring in assets into our project panel. In the next tutorial, I'm going to look at how we capture footage that we have on our digital video camera that we haven't actually brought into our PC at this point. And following on from the capture tutorial, I'm going to look at how we create folders, or using Premiere Pro terminology, bins, to collect together all similar types of files. Okay, see you in a moment. Of course, one of the most essential elements of making a film is the actual raw footage you film ready to be imported into Premiere Pro CS5 and made available for editing into a finished product. If you record your raw footage to an SD card with the type of camera that you have, then you can simply drag and drop these files into Premiere Pro. However, if you film to DV tape, digital video tape, then you'll need to do what's called a capture of your footage. This involves playing back the tape whilst your camera is connected to your PC. Now, there are a couple of different ways of connecting your camera to the PC, either FireWire, USB. You'll have to check with your connections on your camera to see how you connect. Okay, as you can see, I've got Premiere Pro open, and I've positioned this screen recording over the center of the user interface. So, to start our capture, just go up to Window and down to Capture. And this opens this capture user interface. So this is what we do. Notice over here on the right of the capture user interface, we have this setup area. By clicking this Capture Reveal, I can choose to capture audio and video from the tape at the same time, or just audio on its own, or just video on its own. Now, on the footage I'm about to capture, I should really just capture the video because there is the sound of machinery in the background that needs replacing. However, for demonstration purposes, I'll capture audio and video. Having said that, of the 4 clips I filmed, the first 2 clips have no audio audible, owing to the audio recording level on my camera being turned as low as possible because of the actual noise of the machinery. Clips 3 and 4 do have the audio audible though, with the intensive machinery noise in the background, but we will fix this in a later tutorial. Right, moving down, in this area I'm going to give the DV tape I used an identity so that I can identify it later. I'll call it Pub Walks. And below it in this clip name field, I'll be more specific with the name I want Premiere Pro to automatically create for each clip. When I capture in a moment, this name, Appleton Farm, will also get a numbered suffix. You'll see what I mean as we capture the footage. In the fields below, I could further identify each clip with notes, but for this example, I'll leave it blank. Notice also these settings here for timecode in and out points. I won't make use of this for this capture. The only other setting I want to make is this Scene Detect checkbox. By ticking it, it means that each clip on my DV tape gets saved individually, in this case as 4 separate clips, rather than as one long combined clip. Notice that when I did click on the Scene Detect checkbox there, over here, this gets indented to remind me that at the capture stage, at any point where I switch the camera on and off, i.e. I changed scene, then a new clip will be detected. Right, in the next tutorial, we'll actually set about doing the capture. See you in a moment. Welcome back. We set up our capture interface in the last tutorial. So let's look at what we need to do to physically capture the footage from our digital video camera in this tutorial. Just before I do, I'll just indicate where the main controls are positioned. As you'll no doubt guess, these buttons here are the play and related jog and shuttle buttons. If I want to simply audition or review what's on the tape, and I know I don't require the first few minutes of footage, I would click the fast forward button to find the position at which I want to begin my capture. Alternatively, I could just click this play button here and watch the playback of what's on my DV tape in this monitor window. At present, I'm only playing the video from the DV tape in my camera and not actually recording or capturing to my hard drive. Okay, I'll just rewind back to the start of a tape now I've reviewed it. To record or capture to my hard drive, I just need to click this red record button. And this time, not only do we view the raw footage, but it's also being captured to my hard drive. Notice that as soon as the clip has been captured, the file is immediately referenced in the project panel, and the name of the file takes on the name we set in the clip name field. So each of the 4 clips take the name Appleton Farm with a numerical suffix to distinguish it. Now, as mentioned in the previous tutorial, the first 2 clips here have no sound. It's only when we get to the 3rd clip and the 4th clip do we hear the recorded audio with the annoying machinery noise in the background. Right, once the capture has completed, we just need to click the stop button and close the capture panel. We can see the clip names better here now. So that's all we need to do to capture DV footage from a DV tape-based camcorder. Okay, let's move on from here. Now we've seen how to import existing hard drive residing assets into our project panel, and additionally how to capture footage from a DV tape. I think it's time to look at how we can organize our assets into folders so that we don't get too swamped with millions of disparate raw video files and audio files and photographs and all the other assets that collect together as part of our project. In the project panel here, we can see already that we've got all these different movie files and one sequence file there. And if we were to add any more files, then we would very quickly lose any room we have available here. Now, I appreciate we could just simply drag the area down here like this, but depending on how many assets that we do import, then this could very quickly fill up. So we need a method of organizing our project panel because, and I know I've said it before, and I'll say it again, as our project develops our different types of assets inevitably expand to the power of Einstein. So, to help us keep track of all the various types of assets in our project, we'll create specific folders for each asset type. Now, I call them folders, but the correct terminology, and the one Adobe adopts with Premiere Pro, is bins. Okay, they're not folders, they are bins. Now, I use the terms interchangeably, so if I'm talking about folders and I'm talking about bins, just remember I've forgotten to call them bins all the time. Okay, so here's what we'll do. We'll create some bins and name them so that we can tidy up our project panel. Just to remind you, we do have this label field here with all these different movie files indicated as a sort of light blue there and a grey there for the introduction sequence. But even so, with this label field, this can become quite densely populated with a large number of assets, and therefore we need a way to create order. So let's create a raw footage bin. First of all, seeing as the assets that we have here are pretty much all movies, the quickest way to create a bin is to come down to this icon here where it says new bin. Just click on there and we can see immediately that we have a bin with bin 01 indicated as its name. Let's rename that to raw for raw footage, and I'll just click there to commit it. Now all I need to do is just select my files. So I'll left click on these movie files on the top one there and on the bottom one there, and that means all those files are highlighted, so I can just left click and just drag onto the top of raw there. And then that now means that within this folder, this bin rather, I have all those movie files. Now I'm going to do the same with these AVI files, these movie files as well. Just left click and drag into the bin there. Okay, so we've got much more screen real estate left in the project panel to build up all our other assets. If we do want to see what's in the folder, just click the reveal arrow there and there we go. I'll just close it. Now what I'll do is I'll create some more folders, more bins rather. Click the new bin button. I'll call this one audio and I'll create another. I'll create this one as photographs and another for narration. I suppose I best have one for music, another for sound effects, just label this as SFX, sound effects there, and one final one because I know during this course I'm going to build up quite a number of sequences, so I'll call this one sequences, if only I could spell. There we go. And I'll just close all these arrows, these reveals, don't need those because there's nothing in them at the present time. Okay, done. I'm not going to drag this introduction sequence into the sequence bin yet. I'll do that when I build up some more sequences within this project. We'll do that in a later tutorial. So for now, I think we're done looking at how we create project bins and how we drag the video clips, or any type of clip, whether it's an audio, photograph, whatever, how we drag those clips into our bin. Okay, right, see you in a moment. In this tutorial, what we're going to look at is this area at the bottom of our project panel, these project panel buttons. Now you might have noticed how the screen real estate is set up at the present time, in that it looks a little bit more cramped. Remember what I said earlier on about how these tutorials, by necessity, owing to the way that they are formatted for VTC to be delivered to you, sometimes I have to cram up the panels on the screen in slightly different ways. Anyway, having said all that, let's just adjust these panels so that we can see things a little bit better. Now, we've already seen how we can just roll our mouse over the border between the panels and just drag to the right or the left or to the bottom, up or down. Well, if we want to do movement between vertical, up or down, or horizontal, side to side at the same time, just roll your mouse to the corner where it turns into a four-ended arrow there. Just left click and then just drag to what you want it to look like, and notice how all the other panels adjust as you like to see them. I'll take it to about there, I think. Okay, so as I said, you'll have noticed these buttons down at the foot of the project panel. Now, they actually either make our job easier or provide another way of looking at things. For example, the first two icons, these two here, are related in that they enable us to differently display our assets in the project panel. At the moment we can see this first one, and as we roll over it we get the tooltip list view there. This first one is indented, so that tells us that it's this view we are looking at, the list view. And if you notice right at the foot of the screen down here, I can't point my mouse at it, so I'll have to draw a red arrow on the screen for you as normal. Every time I move my mouse away from the icon, then the message down there disappears. It's like playing hide and seek, isn't it? Anyway, so as it says there, that's the list view, and we get that message in the bottom there saying switch the current view to list view. And we've got this project panel set up as list view here. All these bins are in alphabetical order in a list. Now, if we want to reverse this, by the way, see where it says name up here, this field? I don't know if you can make it out, but there's an arrow just pointing there, just pointing upwards, a little grey arrow. If we just click anywhere in the field, it doesn't really matter. This grey arrow will not point up, it'll point down. I'll just click it now. And as soon as I do, then we still get the list view, but we get the alphabetical order in reverse order. Okay, to revert back to where we were, just click on it again. If we want to change this to the icon view, which is the next one there along, icon view, just click on it, and then we see these bins as icons. And we'll just drag the scroll bar down to see them all. And up again. If we want to open one of these, by the way, and there's only any real point opening this raw file, this raw bin, because this is the only one with something in it, just double click it and it opens up this view for us so we can see everything inside that particular folder, that particular bin. If we want to change the view from the icon view here, then notice also we get all these same buttons across the bottom here too. So we might want to change that to list view. So we can see everything that's inside this bin here, the raw bin, that in the project panel is set at the icon view. Well, inside that bin, we can alter this so it looks and presented to us as the list view or the icon view, whichever you prefer. Now, I don't know if you remember, back in the preferences tutorial, this is how we set this double-clicking operation of any of these bins to open up in this view here. Just go back to the preferences tutorial to remind yourself. Okay, I'll just click that to close it, and I'll just move back to the list view. Now, moving along, the third icon is greyed out. We can't see it at the moment. It says automate to sequence. As we get more and more assets imported into our project panel, then this will become useful to us. And I'll show you how this works in a later tutorial. To the right, the next icon is this find icon. It looks like a magnifying glass. When I click on that, I get this find user interface that allows me to search through all these different bins for a particular file. Okay? There's more on this find search operation and this dialog box in chapter 3. Okay? I'll see you there for that one. I'll just close it for now. Moving along again, we've already seen this icon, this button, when we created all these bins here. It's the, of course, new bin button. So I'll just click there. And there we go, we've got bin 10 created for us because so far we must already have 9 bins created. And if we want to get rid of it, just highlight it, click on it once, and you can just click your delete button on your keyboard, or you can move over to this icon, the clear button, just by clicking it, and it takes that away. And the final button across the bottom here is this one that we're going to look at, the new item icon. And just by clicking on there, we get this reveal drop down, and we can choose to create a new sequence, a new offline file, title, bars and tone, black video, color matte, universal counting leader, or a transparent video. So very quickly, we can create any of these just by clicking on this new item icon there. And the last thing I want to look at in this tutorial, remember we did have a look at this in an earlier tutorial where we can just left click on the scroll there and just drag it to the right or to the left. Or alternatively, use the arrows, clicking away like that. And clicking away, coming back again till we get to the beginning. Okay, so that's the project panel buttons that we can see along the bottom here of our project panel. In the next tutorial, we're going to look in more detail at these two buttons. Okay, right, good one. I'll see you in a moment. we looked briefly at the difference between the list view, which we have here displayed in the project panel, and the alternative view, the icon view, reached by clicking this button here. Now, you might wonder if there's any practical purpose that differentiates the two views, other than just being a visually different display of the same information about your files. Well, certainly the icon view is more visual and, in this respect, can be more impressive, I suppose, if you have clients in your editing studio. I say impressive, I mean useful too, because the icon view's larger screen footprint allows them to be seen at a distance, something that can be necessary if you have clients in the studio and they can't physically get close to your monitor. Also, something else you can do more easily in this icon view is move the assets around in the grid. Let me just open this RAW file. I'll just open that and we get the bin view here for the RAW folder. I'll just drag down here so we can see all the files that we've got. Now, as I say, we've got this grid structure here with all these squares and all the different movie files that I've filmed already residing in one square each. And as I say, with this view you can move any of the assets around into a different position. So for example, this first clip here, all I need to do is left click and maybe I want to drag it to this position here. Now, why would I want to do that? Well, by being able to move your files into a different order, you can then combine them with the automate to sequence function, this one down here, and we can also see it in the project panel too there. So as I say, you can combine this with the automate to sequence function to automatically place a number of clips on the timeline in a specific order other than alphabetic. Because at the moment, the way it's set up, we get an alphabetic order for all these different files, but we might not want to have them on our timeline in alphabetic order. So we could move them around. Maybe I want this clip to be here, and perhaps this clip. I'll drag that to there. So as you can see, I'm reordering the structure of all these different files. So now, what I would need to do is highlight all of them, click on that first one there, highlight the last one, and then by clicking this button, the Automate to Sequence button, then that will automatically take all those files and place them in the order that they are here, going left to right that way, then this way, then this way, would automatically put all those files onto the timeline in that order. We'll look more at sequence automation in a later tutorial, but I just wanted to point that out as one of the significant differences between this view, the icon view, and the list view. Okay, I'll just close this down for now. And incidentally, if we want to move one of these bins stroke folders to a different position, just left click on it and move it somewhere else. Okay, go back to the list view and we'll see that our files are now still in alphabetical order. I'll just open up the RAW folder and we can see our files are in alphabetical order. Appleton Farm 01 first, Appleton Farm 02, etc. first, and then alphabetically after A we would come to M. Now these files, because I brought them in from a memory card rather than capturing them, then these files take on the format that particular camera I filmed those clips in. It takes on the format of that camera, a Canon G11. Okay, I'll just close that down. So as I say, the icon view is more visual, and a practical reason for having the icon view is we can move things around into a different structure so that we can visually see where we want the clips to be placed when we automate that sequence to the timeline. Okay, that should do us for this tutorial. I'll see you in the next one. I expect you'll have appreciated by now that Premiere Pro's interface, like all Creative Suite programs, are adjustable and customizable. The simplest method is to drag panels around, as we've seen before, just by rolling your mouse over, left-clicking and dragging to the left or to the right, or at the bottom there, at the division, left-click, drag down and up. And all the time, all the other panels, the neighbouring panels, adjust in sympathy. We also saw how we can just roll over the corner and we can drag like that and move things around a little bit more in terms of adjusting everything at the same time. Okay, I'll just drag this one back to about there, just to line it up. Additionally, you'll have noticed that each work area has a couple or more tabs available to click to reveal another aspect of that program. For example, this one up here, we have the project panel, and next to its right we have the resource central, which we access just by clicking on it. On the middle panel area here, we have these tabs. We have the source monitor, we have effect controls, audio mixer, and if we just drag to the right there, we can see metadata too. Okay, I'll just bring that in a little bit and click back on source. I think this tab facility is extremely useful because it means a lot of frequently used facilities are just a click away. Now, if we want to see what tabs we have got set up already in our user interface, just go up to Window here, click, and where you see a tick next to some of these options, this means that that tab is available somewhere and is the foremost tab in a particular panel view. So I'll just click over to the right here. So for example, here where we've got source out of these 4 tabs as the foremost tab, because that's the one we've got clicked rather than effect controls, go back to source there. By going up to window and dropping down, we can see that source monitor there is ticked to tell us that that is the foremost tab available. By the same token, imagine we click on Media Browser right down here and go up to Window. Then we can see, by coming down to here, Media Browser is ticked. Rather than Info, the one above it, and if you noticed, Info is the tab next to the Media Browser in this area here. Additionally, to the right of that is Effects, and we can see up here, Effects has not been ticked. Doesn't mean it's not available. It just means at this point, with this workspace that we are using, that Effects is not the foremost tab. By looking at this area again, we've got the source monitor as the foremost tab available. If we want to bring metadata to the front, we could either click on it there, or I'll just click on source again, or go up to window and just drop down to metadata and click there. And it automatically brings it up for us and brings it to the front there. And now if we go back to window, we'll see metadata has been ticked to tell us that in this area, then metadata is at the forefront of the 4 tabs rather than the source monitor, which is what we saw a moment ago. I'll click back on source monitor and then that brings the source monitor tab to the front. Now, no doubt, when you've got your user interface looking like you want it, i.e. a workspace that you're comfortable with, then no doubt you'll have noticed if you go up to window here, you can see this tab here where it says workspace, and by rolling to the right, we can see all these different options here. We've got 5 options: audio, color correction, editing, and that's highlighted at the moment, effects, and meta logging. Now, the reason editing is highlighted at the moment is because, I'll just click out of here, is because this user interface, this workspace, is known as the editing workspace by default. This is how it is set up by Adobe. We can also see the same thing if we go over to here where it says workspace. We can see this drop down here where initially we've got editing, but if we use the reveal drop down, click on there, then we can see the same thing as we saw when we were up here on Windows and coming across. So by using this function over here, this reveal drop down, we can change our workspace view so it takes on the look of any of these 5 different options. So for example, if we weren't editing at a particular point in our movie making and we wanted to do some color correction, then we would just click on the color correction tab, and as soon as I do, notice how the user interface completely changes. I'll just click it now, and immediately the whole thing looks completely different. And this is the workspace for color correction, and Adobe has set this up like this for us, assuming this will be the best way to make color corrections. And it's very easy if we want to change that back to editing, for example, which is where we were. Just click on there, or audio. Notice how it changes again, or we can go to effects. Not radically different, but it is a little bit different. For example, the source monitor has now been shuffled along to the second tab, and effect controls comes first. And over here, remember our project panel here was first, and now it's second, and the effects have been moved up to this position rather than being at the bottom here when we were on. I'll just go on to the editing again. The effects are down here. It's very easy to move any of these tabs if we want to, but we don't need to if we just feel we are satisfied with the way Adobe has set up the workspace for us. Okay, I'm going to leave this overview tutorial now, and we'll look at setting our workspaces in the next tutorial. Okay, see you in a second or two. As much as Adobe have a clear eye on what works well as a workspace, it's nice to be able to customize a workspace so that it fits into our workflow more comfortably. I suppose what you could do is design an individual custom workspace from scratch, but probably the quickest way of doing this is to adapt an existing Adobe configured workspace and make it look how you want it to look. So let's do that here. We'll use this editor workspace that we're now familiar with. Let's look at what panel tabs are open by default. We'll start up in the top left in the project panel. When I'm editing a film, it's essential to have the project panel available. So I obviously need this tab here. But the tab moving along to the right, Resource Central there, it's rare for me to use Resource Central. In fact, Resource Central tends to be used by me only when I'm in Encore CS5 or Sound Booth CS5. So really, it rarely gets used within Premiere Pro. As I say, in this area here, the top left, I tend to just use this project panel. But just for this tutorial, I'll just go to Resource Central tab there, and see here where it says refresh. I'll just click on there, and I'm told that we are connecting. I'll just flick over to Sound Booth now so you can see why I use Resource Central in Sound Booth. Okay, top left in Sound Booth, right next to Files, next to Scores is Resource Central there, and as you can see I'm online. Now with Resource Central here with Sound Booth, I'll just drag this down, we have 3 tabs: a News tab, a Sound Effects tab, and a Scores tab. I'll go back to Sound Effects, and all these sound effects within Sound Booth's Resource Central access point, then I can download these as I want to, or some scores there too, as it's just connecting. There we go. Okay, back to Premiere Pro now. So you see, within something like Sound Booth, I can see there's an awful lot of available material for me that I can use. However, in Premiere Pro, what I can do is I can get some news here, as we saw in Sound Booth, or click on templates there. It's just connecting. And templates here that you can use in your DVD authoring later on within Encore can be downloaded here as well. And you can see the tab here indicates at the moment Resource Central is showing all the corporate tabs, or you can just click on the drop down there and choose something else. For example, travel brings up these templates that you could use within Encore later on. Okay, I'll just go back to the project tab there. Anyway, getting back to workspaces and how we can customize them. If I don't want Resource Central, just clicking on it there, and see this little cross here? Well, if I click that where it says close, that takes away Resource Central from this project panel area in the top left. So I'll just click there now, and that removes that tab. So already I've customized my workspace. And then maybe in the middle section over here, where we have metadata, for example, maybe I'm not going to use that as much as Adobe think I'm going to use this, so I could just click the close there and remove that. Of course, if I want to bring it back, just go to Window and drop down to metadata, and it becomes available again for us. So imagine I just close it again, click on source there, and this is the way I want my workspace to look. Maybe I could adjust these panels to look slightly different, maybe bring this one over here, and maybe bring this down to the bottom. Well, this could be the workspace how I work when I'm editing, and so by doing all these little customizations, we get to use an editing workflow that suits us. At a later point, if you want to reset your workspace so that it looks like it did when you installed the program, just go to Window, Workspace there, and see down here where it says Reset Current Workspace. By clicking on that, I'll do that now, we get this message, Reset Workspace. Are you sure you want to reset editing to its original layout? Yes, I am, so I'll click Yes. And immediately, the editing workspace goes back to how it was when we installed the program. We've got Resource Central back up here, and we've got the metadata over here in these panels. Okay, and all our panels are adjusted now back to the size they were. You'll have noticed if I click on Window again and go to Workspace, you'll have noticed if I want to create a brand new workspace without customizing one of the existing workspaces, I would just click on New Workspace there and give it a name when this dialog box comes up. At the moment it says Untitled Workspace, so I would give that a name. Okay, I'll just click the Cancel for now. Furthermore, if we go to Workspace and Delete Workspace, if I just click Delete Workspace, we get the dialog here, delete workspace, name, which one do we want to delete? Do we want to delete audio, color correction effects, meta-logging? Well, I actually don't want to delete any really, do I? So I'll click cancel, but the option's there, should you want to. Okay, finally, go up to workspace. The very last option there, which is ticked, import workspace from projects. So the last time that you set a workspace to suit you, rather than the conventional one that ships with Premiere Pro, then if you've adapted the workspace and this import workspace from projects is ticked, then Premiere Pro remembers how you've adjusted all the panels and the tabs to suit you. Okay, so that's how we customize workspace and reset workspaces should we need to, and we had a quick glance at Resource Central there, didn't we? Okay, right, we'll leave it here for this one and we'll progress further. In the past few tutorials, we've looked at the panel tabs, these tabs up here and over here, and we just click on them as we've seen previously. Now, even though we've looked at these panel tabs that head each of the panel areas, we've only really looked at them in an almost incidental manner. So what I thought I would do in this tutorial, I thought I would consolidate panel tab information so that we have a good knowledge of what they are and what they offer. So, as previously seen, albeit briefly, each panel area has a number of tabs, as we've just seen here, for example, and these tabs are brought into focus simply by clicking on the tab name, as we've just seen. Just clicking along each tab simply brings that tab to the front. And also, if we want to get rid of a tab, or probably a better term would be to close the tab, because we don't actually really get rid of the tabs function. It doesn't get deleted out of Premiere Pro, we just get rid of the tab itself on the user interface, but that can easily be brought back. But if we do want to get rid of a tab, for example, let's move over here to this metadata one. If we want to get rid of this, as we've seen previously, just click on the little cross just about to the right of each of the tab names there. So for metadata, we'll just click that cross there, and the tooltip close appears for us. So by clicking that, we get rid of that view of the tab from this frame here. And just to bring it back, let's go to Window. Let's remind you how to do this. Come down to metadata in the list there in the drop down, click on there, and it reverts back to how it looked previously within this frame of 4 different tabs. Okay, you'll have noticed also that each tab panel group resides within a frame that contains workflow related tabs. So in this area, for example, the source monitor is linked with effect controls, is linked with the audio mixer, and linked with metadata. Now, these tabs are known as docked tabs because they are docked within a frame, and you can't really do anything other than just click on them to bring them to the front. I'll say you can't do anything with them. I'll show you how to do something different with them in a moment. I'm talking about a free floating tab. All these tabs work within the frame that they are residing in, but some actually seem to sit on top of the whole user interface and we can move them around. We did see this in an earlier tutorial when we looked at this raw bin here. I'll just double click on it, and this bin tab is made available for us to just drag, left click there, drag and move around to put where we want to. So as you can see, free floating panel tabs can be opened or created for those operations that don't need to be consistently always immediately available in view. Okay, I'll just close that one down. Now, if I want to make an existing docked tab into a floating tab, let's make this metadata one. In previous versions of Premiere Pro, to make an existing docked tab into a floating tab meant left clicking on it and just dragging outside of the frame area. So I suppose a quicker method of doing this is if we just roll over the name itself, and we'll do it with metadata there, right click, and then see there where it says undock panel, just click on there, and now we can see this metadata panel can be moved around quite freely wherever we want to move it to. and by just moving back towards where we want it to be, possibly over here, just left clicking on the name itself and just moving up to the tab there where it originally came from, just let go and it jumps in there. It's actually gone into the 3rd position there rather than the 4th position where it originally was, but all we need to do there is just left click and just drag to the right, and it moves it for us. We can do this with any of these tabs. If we want the source panel monitor there to be at the end of the 4th position, just drag along and put it where you want it to go to. Okay, let's put it back. So make sure that you are on the little grab dots at the left of the name, left click and just drag it to the position you want it to be at. Okay, and clearly we can do this with any of the panels. We'll go to this frame over here. If we want Resource Central to come before the project panel, just left click on those dots and just move it to the left. And if we want to put it back, just move it to the right. Okay, it's as easy as that. Okay, so that's a consolidated panel tab information tutorial for you so that you've got a good knowledge, as I say, of what they are and what they offer and how we can move them around so that we have them positioned on the screen where we want them. Okay, good one. Let's leave it here for now. So far, the only 2 types of file I've imported into Premiere Pro have been video movie files. Now, even though all the files were movie files, they were 2 different types. However, when you are watching the 2 types back, you won't notice the difference, and this is good. This is how it should be. Before I talk more about other types of file formats that Premiere Pro can understand, let's have a quick look at the 2 video formats imported already. I'll just open up my raw folder here. I'll just drop the reveal there and drag down so we can see these files. And I just need to expand the panel there so I can see a little bit more of these fields here. And I'll do the same down here and I'll just drag across to about there, because we're going to be using this files of type reveal drop down in a second or two. Now, you'll remember the first files I imported were movie files of a country pub that sits en route on one of the country walks around Cheshire. This movie file type was filmed onto an SD card of a stills camera, a Canon G11. Now, Premiere Pro CS5 has increasingly adapted to the trend for stills cameras to also have the capacity to film video footage too. And these were the files down here that end with a suffix .mov. If we click on any of these files, I'll just click on the first one, we can inspect the video file format in more detail. As I say, it's a movie format type, which is the Apple QuickTime format, and some information we can see up here next to the thumbnail view. We get to see that it's a movie format at 640 by 480 pixels, and it plays back at 30 frames per second, 30 FPS there. And the audio was recorded at 44 kilohertz in a compressed format, and it's in mono. Now, it's not unusual for a camera such as a Canon G11, which really is a stills camera, with video filming capability added on as an extra. We can see this 30 frames per second frame rate is also mentioned here in the frame rate. If we drag the slider across, we can find out other information about it, such as here we get told again that it's 640 by 480, as we're told up here. And again, just take that back a little bit, the audio information is 44 kilohertz compressed M, which is short for mono, of course. And let's just take that back to the left again. The second video type that's in our project is the more traditional AVI format that we brought into Premiere Pro by using the capture panel, owing to the fact the footage was on a digital video tape. Now, let's look at these files and compare to the earlier 30 frames per second movie file format. These 4 files up here, 1, 2, 3, 4, were the files that were captured. And these have been captured at a frame rate of 25 frames per second. And if we look up here, at the resolution of 720 by 576 pixels. And the audio is recorded at a higher fidelity of 48 kilohertz 16-bit stereo. Now, 48 kilohertz is only marginally above 44 kilohertz, or 44.1 really, for these movie files, but it's just enough, the 48 kilohertz, to give a sonically superior sound, and 48 kHz is the standard for video formats and movie making, whereas 44.1 kHz is the standard for CD quality audio. Now, these aren't the only two types of movie format that Premiere Pro can understand, because Premiere Pro can understand many movie file formats, including high definition and standard definition. Now, when we are making a film, we don't just rely on video. So, additionally, Premiere Pro needs to be able to import a variety of audio formats and a variety of still images and illustration formats. If we drop down to this area here I alluded to earlier on in the media browser, files of type, if we just click on all supported files there and just drop the reveal, and we can see all the different types of files that Premiere Pro can import, ranging from an AVI movie up at the top there, Adobe After Effects projects, which isn't necessarily just the file type. We get Adobe Illustrator files. We get older versions of Premiere Pro here, Premiere 6. Adobe Sound documents, bitmaps for images. We get various types of movie formats here, including FLV, a flash format there, Flash Video. So that's good integration with another Adobe product, Flash. We even get Final Cut Pro format. So you might be working on the film in Premiere Pro and then pass on all the information, all the files, all the formats to somebody else who might also be working on the film with you, but they might be using Final Cut Pro. We can see JPEG files here for photographs, the ubiquitous compressed photographic format. For photographic formats, Premiere Pro easily interprets JPEG, TIFF, PNG, bitmaps, and the native Photoshop format. We can see this down here, Photoshop. More on this later on because it's really good integration, really nice tight integration with Photoshop. And as I said, we've got the Flash formats, we've got QuickTime movies, which we've seen up here, TIFF image files, and I'll just drop down and see what else we've got. Okay, these different types of high definition movie files. Okay, so you can see that we've got an abundance of formats that Premiere Pro can understand. And as I've just said, the great thing about Premiere Pro being part of the Creative Suite is the fact that Illustrator, Adobe's Illustrator, Adobe's Photoshop, and Adobe Flash formats integrate seamlessly. Okay, we'll leave this file formats information tutorial here, and we'll progress in the next tutorial to look at the search function when we want to find a particular type of file, maybe either by name or by format. Okay, see you in a moment. As our project expands and we introduce a wide variety of assets that involve a wide range of file format types, can you see now why we had the previous tutorial on file formats? Well, it's good practice to place each file in a specific file type folder, as we have set up in this project in an earlier tutorial. Now, as I say, it's good working practice to create all these different folders, or these different bins as Adobe calls them, but even when we adopt this workflow, we can find that our project gets populated by hundreds of files. And unfortunately, the task of finding a specific file can be quite daunting. Well, Premiere Pro provides, as always, a couple of different methods for finding files buried deep within our project. Now at present, we only have around 15 files in our project, but don't worry, we'll add to this as the course progresses. But the principle of the two different search functions that I'm about to show you still remains the same as when you have 1,015 files. Our first option up here, where we've got this magnifying glass, and we'll just roll over there to see the tooltip, filter bin content. Well, what this is going to do, if I type anything into this field here, Premiere Pro will essentially filter out any file that doesn't involve whatever I type into this field. Sounds more complicated than it is. I'll show you how it works in a second. Well, this first option here is useful if we know the name or maybe the partial name of a file. For example, I know in this raw folder here, this raw bin, if I just reveal it, I know that there is a file here, as we can see, called mvi_0562.mov. But imagine I didn't know where this particular file was. And all I could remember, however unlikely it might sound, all I could remember was 0562. Let me just close this. So if I go back up here to the filter bin content field and start to type in 0562, notice what happens. I'll type in 0 first of all. Well, Premiere Pro gives me a list here now of all the different options that perhaps contain a 0 in some way. Well, I want to narrow that down further, so I'll type in 5. Okay, Premiere Pro's narrowed it down a little bit more for me, and I'll type in 6, and finally 2. And once I click enter, then Premiere Pro has found this file for me, this MVI 0562.movie file. Don't worry about this being duplicated at the moment. I've imported it twice accidentally earlier on, so I'll just delete one now, just by highlighting it and clicking down here on the clear button. Okay, so now our search in this field here, 0562, has quickly found this particular file for us. Okay, that works well enough for us. I'll just close that. And so that we don't hit this by accident again, let me just close with the cross there. Now, the second method admittedly looks more complicated, but is actually quite simple. It's similar to the find search macros that you often find in Microsoft products. And to get a user interface, all we need to do is just drop down to this magnifying glass here, where we roll over it and it says Find. I'll just click that now, and I'll just move the Find panel over so that we can see it a little bit better, perhaps about there. Okay, so it looks a little bit more complicated than the function up here, but essentially what we get are two search or find functions in one. This first line here and this second line here. Now don't worry, we don't have to use both. It's just that if the first line doesn't find what we want, then the second line might. Okay, so we've got three different columns here. Now in this first field here, this reveal drop down, at the moment it's indicated as name, but if we just drop down there, we can choose any of these particular formats to find. Now what I'm going to do for this search, I'm going to search for frame rate. Now I don't know if you remember, but earlier on when we imported the movie files, they came in at 30 frames per second. And when we captured from digital videotape, it came in at 25 frames per second. Well, perhaps I could do a search now using this find panel to find only 25 frame per second clips. Okay, so moving along now to the operator, I want to find a frame rate that contains, or I could say starts with, or ends with, or matches exact, but I'm going to go for contains because I'm going to type in 25 for 25 frames per second, and I don't particularly want to say that the file starts with 25 frames per second, just in case the file doesn't. So I'm just going to click contains. That's a more overall setting that I want to use. So I'll just type in 25 now and click find. Well, first of all, this introduction sequence file is the first file found for us because, as you can see there, it says 25 frames per second. If I click again, then it automatically opens up. I'll just move this to the right a little bit. It automatically opens up a raw file folder for us and finds this file, which is Appleton Farm 01, as the first referenced file that has 25 frames per second. I'll just bring this over here again. Now, if I click find again, it's going to go to the next found example of something that contains 25 as a frame rate. And you can guess, can't you? I'll click find again, goes to the third, and find again goes to the fourth. Okay, so I'll just click done. So that very quickly finds these 25 frame per second files for me using the search function there. Okay, right, we'll leave this search function tutorial here and we'll move on. Okay, now we're getting to where the action is. As you know, Premiere Pro comprises its user interface and it's made up of frames and panels, such as this one here and this one here. In this tutorial, we're going to look closely at this panel here, the source monitor panel. Now, one way of working, well, certainly it works for me, is to import all our assets. And so far, we've imported these video files. I'll just drag down a little bit so we can see them. Maybe a little bit more to there. So, as I say, we import the assets. Then the next method of working in our video making chain, I suppose, would be to check these video files for suitability and then edit them, because let's face it, you might have filmed a certain clip that lasts a minute. Maybe you only want about 10 seconds of that clip. Maybe because the camera footage was a little bit too shaky if it was a handheld camera. Or it might be that a certain element of that long clip, that minute clip, you were waiting for an event to happen, or maybe you were waiting for something to clear out of shot before the focal point of your clip became apparent. So what I'm saying is, essentially, any of these clips, they're bound to be okay, but they may not be absolutely perfect. Certainly not the whole length of them. So, using this panel here, the source monitor panel, we can first check and edit and ascertain the suitability of these source files, these raw movie files. Incidentally, in the source monitor, as we progress through the course, you'll notice that we can use this source monitor to not only just look at movies, but we can look at photographs, we can ascertain suitability for audio, i.e. we can play back audio and we can edit out certain areas that we don't like. Anyway, once we've looked at the asset in the source monitor, it's at that point we would drag it down onto the timeline, and then we would be able to watch that in the program monitor. But as I say, in this tutorial, we're going to look at the source monitor. And as its name indicates, we can look at source files, any of these. And then if this thumbnail view up here is too small for us to look at, then clearly we would look at it in the source monitor. Now there are a couple of different ways, as always, to get an asset into the source monitor. Let me just drag this down a little bit further, and we'll just choose one at random. Let's go for this one, 0568 movie. We can either left click on the file there and just drag and drop onto the source monitor, or, let me just close this down, or we can just double click the file and it does the same thing. You'll notice what I did then to close it down. I just go to this arrow up here next to the file name. The MVI_0568 is the name of the file, and we can see the same thing over here and down here. To close it, just click on the drop down there and notice first of all that the highlighted radio button there for the file name is indicated. Well, we would just click close. Now if we had a few files open, let's just double click a few of these files. Then by going up to the drop down again, we can see all these different files. 1, 2, 3, 4 files are layered within our source monitor. So if we want to see this one, for example, the next one up, just click on that and then that takes us there. Or could go to that one, or we could go to that one. And we've already seen by clicking close there, closes that particular file, so now we've only got 3. But to close all 3 at once, you know where I'm going here, don't you? Just click on close all there. Right, we'll leave this tutorial here. In the next tutorial, we'll look at a couple more different settings that we can alter. See you in a moment.